I arrived in Dallas. It was 1973, late in the year. I felt like Rip Van Winkle, seriously. I had never seen anything like these. Think about it, 1973, I'd been gone 4 years, and I'm looking at these El Caminos. I'm looking at a Monte Carlo with tonneau tops on it. I'm in the elevator at Baylor Hospital, and there's the men in this houndstooth fabric that I realize is polyester. I mean, I felt like, honest to God, and of course I stood out. You know, I still looked a little bit, still had a little bit of that pimp in me, you know. But anyway, I finally get up there, and I get off on the floor, and I go, and I see, Mother, of course, had since remarried, and so it said, Mary Lucy Adair, and I walked through the door. And when I walked through the door, the first thing I did, of course, was smile at her, and she took a look at my mouth, and she said, Harrison, it's not cancer that's killing me, it's your 20s. And I said to her, well, you must feel like you're losing your mind. She said, well, Harrison, losing your mind's a lot harder than you think. I tried for years. And then she says, what's wrong with this picture? I've been taking Valiums for years. They've been properly prescribed by doctors. There's nothing illegal. And I'm terminal in here, and they're telling me I can't smoke and I can't take a Valium. So basically, she was withdrawing from cigarettes and Valiums. So I did what anyone should do. I went out on the street and scored 4 Valiums for her. She had 3 weeks to live. You want her like withdrawing from Valiums and cigarettes, and I also bought her some Viceroy. So I went back to her room, and here's what happened. I sat down next to Mother, and she took 2 of the Valium, and we both lit a cigarette, and I watched her calming down. She was sweating and shaking before. And she said to me, before we do anything, I want you to know, and she was referring to her husband, Reeks, she said, you know, the house was still in my name, the house that, that had burned down in 1969. She had divorced Daddy in 65. She said it was still in my name, and I had told you and your father that you could live in that house as long as you wanted. I wanted nothing from your father. I loved him. I just wasn't in love with him anymore, and I wanted to move on. But she said he heavily insured it, and I said to her, are you telling me that you think Reeks burned down our house? And she said, I've often accused him of it. And I said, I'll kill him. And she said, I'd rather you didn't. So we settle in now, and she knows that she really honestly has days, as it turns out, hours. And she says to me, was I a terrible mother, really? And I said, well, there were entirely too many men and an awful lot of pharmaceuticals. And she said to me, well, Harrison, I was never prescribed anything that didn't help something, and as much could be said of almost any man. And I said, including the priest? And she said, well, let's just say he made me feel closer to God. So then the time comes, and she's fading a little bit. It's like, I can watch the escalator going down. And she said, so what will you remember? And I said, well, let me give you Mary Lucy's greatest hits. I said, of course, how could I ignore that when I was 7 years old and finally had the Cub Scouts over, you served them clam dip. And she said, what's wrong with clam dip? I said, Mother, Worcestershire, cream cheese, minced clams, olives. You even added capers and Angostura bitters and served those Gentile boys matzo crackers. They had no earthly idea. And I said, then there was Halloween, the time that you asked me, what do you give people for trick-or-treating? And I said, chocolate. So you gave every one of them, and you were so proud, you gave everyone a full bar of Baker's unsweetened chocolate. And she said, well, they were eating entirely too much sugar. They don't need all that sugar. I said, every time they'd bite into it, they were projectile vomiting in the front yard. My God. She didn't get it. She just somehow had a mental block about, the way children look at things. And I said, then the next year, you said, all right, I said, no chocolate. She said, well, so what do I give them? I said, gum. Well, I thought you'd do juicy fruit. Instead, you handed out full chiclet boxes of Clorettes, which were the chlorophyll green gum that every alcoholic chewed when they were swigging wild turkey and on the job. And it turned their mouth chartreuse. And I said, that's when Ms. Nancy Apple's mother hauled her to the front porch with her chartreuse mouth and said, Mary Lucy, I've just about had it with you. And you turned to me and said, you see, Harrison, our friend Nancy is just dressed as a witch, but her mother really is one. And I said, then there was the time when you emptied your purse on my bed in the middle of the night and asked me to call Delta Airlines and find out how far we could fly. You said, how far can a mature woman and her underage child, I was 14, but I was underage child, fly one way? And it was to Shreveport. So we got on a plane with no money and flew to Shreveport in the middle of the night and landed at dawn with no money. And she said, Harrison, it was illegal to buy liquor by the drink cocktails in Texas, and I wanted a martini. That's a true story. That's why I've got my sister here. God. Then I watch her, and she's starting to fade, and I need to really let her know, seriously. So she says, so I wasn't so terrible? And I said, no, listen. I never was fooled into thinking that you were just born on earth to be our parent. Now, you're a fascinating human being I happen to know who also happened to have been my mother. And I said, you made things colorful and interesting. And she said, I never asked you to respect me, only to love me. And I said, well, I did both. Because I felt that in a world that I've seen where I've had friends tell their parents that they were gay, and parents will very commonly say, I'd rather you be dead. I mean, it happens today. And I said, you know what you did? And she said, what? And I said, you poured me a drink and toasted me and said, you know what, Harrison? I care not what path others may take, but as for me, viva heterosexuality. And that was pretty much the end of it. And I said, the other thing is I learned a lot about men listening to you talking with your best friend Gwen, who's 10 years younger. And she said, like what? And I said, well, I remember you telling Gwen that you really, really pitied any woman that turned 30, having never had a protracted affair with a talented lover who was otherwise worthless. But she said, I also have absolutely no interest in anyone that after 30 still favors them. And I said, I got to thinking about that. And see, I'm pushing 30. I'm 28 right now, so I'm phasing them out. And she said, well, you should have long ago. You were 38 years old the day you were born. I said, but here, and then she says, Harrison, I'm really fading. So if you've got something else you want to tell me, do. But then I think you need to go. And she said, do you have anything else to tell me? And I said, yes, I do. I said, all my life I've noticed how many men think that it's clever, endearing, charming to somehow regard women as these exotic anomalies, as if they are inscrutable enigma. But I said that's really a cop-out, because what I learned by watching you and the world you created is that if a man truly watches and genuinely listens, women are very understandable. And she said, so what are you saying? And I said, well, clueless men are as common as roaches in a waterfront dive, but you did not raise another clueless male. And she said, well, then I guess I can die happy. But lose the tooth.